Hey everybody, and welcome back to FrontendExpert. In this video, we'll be discussing the HTML head tag and all of the metadata it can contain. As a reminder, the head tag is used for information that we don't directly display on the page, but it's still very important information. Inside of the head, we have one required tag, and that is the title. And the title is the title for the page we are on, and this can be used in a few different places. Most notably, it's used as the name of the tab in your browser. It's also usually used in the name of the pages you looked at in your history, as well as search engines use it for the name that they display in search. Moreover, the title is also used for accessibility sometimes. When somebody using an assistive technology wants to navigate to a new page, they can use the title to get a quick idea of what that page is going to be about. Let's give this a title of meta tags, and then in the browser you'll see the tab name title updates to reflect the title and the HTML. Now for the majority of the metadata in the head, we will use what's called the meta tag. So I'll go ahead and add one of those here. And inside of this tag, it takes a few different attributes that will determine what data it provides to the browser about this page. So the first one we'll look at is char set or character set. And this is how we determine what is the character encoding of this website. The most common one we'll use here is UTF-8. And UTF-8 is great because it's accepted by pretty much every browser, and it also has the characters for almost every language in the world, meaning that when you use UTF-8, you don't need to worry about your website not displaying if there's characters from another language. Other than the character set, the majority of the other meta tags will have the exact same attributes. So we'll have a name attribute, and this attribute will be whatever the name of the metadata we want is, so the sort of a key and a key value pair system. And then we have content, and this will be the actual content of that metadata. So for our first one to look at, let's go ahead and look at what is called the viewport. And the viewport is the actual size of the screen, so it allows us to determine how large the window is that the user will be interacting with. And you might be a little bit confused by this as to why we even need that, right? Shouldn't it just be the size of the browser window or the size of the monitor they're looking at? But that's not always what we want. And the reason for that is primarily related to mobile phones. Since mobile phones are small, they do a few special things to try to display websites in the best way possible. So for example, if you had a phone that had a 640 pixel width, what it might do is sort of pretend to be a larger phone than that, pretend to be like 1,000 pixel width, and then it will ask for the 1,000 pixel width version of the website, and then it will simply scale that down to fit the screen size. The reason they do this is that most websites, when you get smaller than around that size of about 1,000 pixels, just don't work very well. They become really hard to read. Everything starts sort of going to new lines way too often, and fonts are all over the place. So that's the way that they deal with that, but it makes a bad user experience. I'm sure you've been on your phone on some website and it's super zoomed out and you can't really see anything. The reason for this is that scaling up and scaling back down. So in the case that we have written good CSS that supports mobile devices, we essentially just want to add a meta tag that will disable that artificial scaling that usually happens on mobile phones. And the way we do that is with the viewport meta tag. And inside the content, we will say that we want the width to equal, and we're going to say device width. Essentially, all this says is to use the width of the actual device. We don't want to be doing anything fancy where the device is pretending to be larger than it actually is. And then the last thing we'll do is we'll add a comma, so these values are comma separated, and we'll say initial scale, and the initial scale will set equal to 1. And what this means is don't try to zoom it in or out. So by default, the mobile phones are going to change their width, and then they're going to scale themselves to account for that change in width. So this is simply saying don't change your width, and then don't zoom yourself in or out. And we'll go ahead and go to some new lines here just so we can keep all this on one page. And those are the two meta tags that you usually want to be setting. So the character set you almost always want, and you want it to be first because you want the browser to encounter the character set it needs as soon as possible. And then the viewport we'll put right below it once we've written good CSS that supports mobile phones. Now there are a variety of other meta tags that we can add that give extra information to the browser. So we'll go ahead and add a few of those now. We're going to go to the bottom of the head. The reason for this is that usually we put the meta tags that are sort of less important at the bottom. It's not something you have to do. The order doesn't matter that much, but it is the convention that I think most people tend to prefer because the browser reads from top to bottom So for example, we want to tell it the character set we're using first, but some of this other information is a little bit less important, so we don't put it at the top. So let's make another meta tag. And for this one, we'll do a name equals author. And what this does is it just allows you to say who wrote the page. So we can say content equals John Doe. So this just says that John Doe was the author of this page. You can think of this like any other document you might write. You would put the author who wrote that document on it. So we do the same thing with HTML, but again, this is optional. You don't need to include this. And along with this, you can also add a description. And the description is a little bit more useful because it gets used in search engines to describe the website. So below the name of the site that you're searching for, it will also usually have a description, and that comes from here. So we can say, this is a great website, and go ahead and close that out. And the one thing to note about this description, because it is used in the search engine like that, you want to make sure it's not too long. Usually around 150 or 160 characters is the limit you want to go with. Beyond that, you'll start getting the ellipses where the search engine won't display the entire description. So we want to be nice and concise. And there are some other meta tags we could add. For example, keywords used to be something people added all the time, but they tend to be ignored completely by search engines now. So there's not much use in adding keywords anymore. There are also some vendor-specific meta tags. So for example, Twitter has some tags that you can use that will tell it when your website is tweeted, how exactly to display that on Twitter. But for now, I think this is a great stopping point for the meta tags. These are really all of the core HTML ones that you might want to include. Along with these meta tags, there's some other information that we might want to include in the head. One of those being a favicon, which is the icon for your website. This is used in the tab bar as well as the title to show a little icon for your site. By default, you usually get that little globe icon that we have now, but we can change that to be whatever we want. So we can go ahead and add a link tag, and this is the same tag that we will use to link CSS back into our HTML, but for now we're going to use it for an icon. And the way we do this is we add a rel attribute, so rel, and then we set this equal to icon, and then we set an href, which will be the hypertext reference, so the actual link to the icon. In this case, I have a local file called icon.png, which we can use as our icon. I'll go ahead and save this. And now you can see in the browser, we have the new logo right next to the name of the tab we're on. So we have the meta tags tab name, which is from our title. And then to the left of that, we have the icon, which happens to be the FrontendExpert logo in this case. And then finally, one more tag we might want to include is the base tag. And what the base tag does is it sets the base URL for your website. This way, whenever you have a relative link, it will go from that URL rather than just from wherever the server was. We can set an href property here as well, and this will be whatever URL we want to be the base for our relative links. I'll go ahead and use algoexpert.io, and I'll close out this tag. And now whenever we use a relative link, it will start with algoexpert.io rather than just wherever our server is. So for an example, let's come down to the body and add an anchor tag, and we can set this to be a link to /content. And I will just put the word content inside of it. And now you'll see we get this content text, but if I click on it, it will go ahead and bring us to algoexpert.io and on the content page, rather than just bringing us to /content in my local directory, which would have gone to a 404 page. Now that's going to be the last tag we'll look at in the head of the HTML. There are plenty others that you can use and experiment with, but I think this should be a great starting point for getting most of the metadata set up for a very well marked up website. And with that, that's going to be the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.